Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. So, you know what? I saw this game earlier, and I had to bring it to you guys, man, because it is an insane game. It starts off kind of chill, but, you know, it gets crazy towards the end. But, of course, for all of my people that are coming from the Philippines, I will say mabuhay. Maligayang pagdating sa my chess, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate everybody very much for stopping by. If you are coming from Norway, I will say God morgen, velkommen, and tusen tak for coming by and taking a look at my video. I really appreciate it very much. But yeah, if you guys are ready to go, this is a gem of a game. Let's go ahead and take a look, see what we got. So we got e4, and then we see b6. We got d4, bishop to b7. We see knight to c3. And this is the Owen's defense. That's bothering me right there that I put that. Hold up. Bam. Okay. This is the Owen's defense. It's one of those hyper modern type of openings. You know, you basically are just thinking that you're going to be slicing into this position. Can I draw an arrow? Thank you. Slicing into this position with the bishop. I mean, it's definitely good for white, but I mean, there is a little bit of play in it. You know, a lot of times there can be some attacks like with d5, knight coming to f6. Not immediately, of course, but, you know, just playing against this pawn, trying to, you know, maybe play bishop to b4 and undermine the protection of that pawn. So, you know, a lot of the attack comes under, you know, like focused on the e4 square, d5, e4 squares and stuff like that. So we will see how Magnus does it. This time, we do see d6, and then we do have f4. And so we have decided to get our, you know, gigantic pawn center this way. Also, something else that was possible, instead of going instead of going knight to c3, you can see bishop to d3, just being a little bit more flexible on how you want to develop your pieces. You know, putting the bishop here, you know, you have the ability to play c4. So if we did see that, we could see c4, bishop to b4 with check, bishop to d2. Bishop takes, queen takes, f5. Like I was telling you guys before, you know, there is a lot of attacking, trying to attack this e4 pawn with d5s and f5s and knight to f6s and stuff like that. So you would probably see knight to c3. That is just another way. If you really, really want that gigantic pawn center, that's another way you can go about doing it. But like I said, we do see f4. We see knight to d7. We got knight to f3. We see e6. Bishop comes to d3. We got c5. Castles. Pawn takes d4, knight takes d4, knight g to f6, and then we do have queen to e2. I mean, Tari just has like a really, really nice, solid position. You know, black is not losing by any means, but, you know, you pretty much just got everything you wanted out of the opening. You know, you have you pretty much pushed all your pawns. You have a really nice pawn center. You know, in these types of positions, f5 can become something to play, or even e5 if d5 is pushed. You know, you just get this bishop out either to, you know, d2 or e3, swing this rook over, and, you know, this king is still in the center of the board, so that can definitely be something. So we do see a6. You know, a very real threat is b5, b4, just displacing this knight. You know, trying to play maybe knight to c5, you know, just gang up on this pawn super severely. Because like I said, a lot of the play in these types of systems for black is playing against more so e4, but sometimes d5, just pretty much that whole diagonal. So we do see a4, bishop comes to e7, we see bishop to d2, castles, and then we do have king to h1. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, king to h1 is kind of like an unnecessary move. You know, we do not have a bishop on this diagonal. The queen is gonna take a couple of moves. It wants to try to come down to c5, but I mean, you can just play bishop to e3. And, you know, you have some discoveries going on. So you don't really have anything kind of slicing down that diagonal. So the king is actually not, you know, the king is not in danger on this square. I was thinking maybe, you know, he moved over so he could probably try to play rook to g1 and just start to push pawns and maybe try to rip the position open. But we will see. We do see knight to c5, rook a comes to e1, and then we do see d5, which is the novelty of the game. And like I said before, d5, you allow the e5 pawn push. But since you do have that knight on c5, you have the ability to come down with the other knight, knight f to e4. And then we do have F5. F5 is just opening things up a lot. You know, the queen has the ability to start to kind of come in. This bishop is opened up. And so you really want to kind of counteract that. And that's what Magnus Carlsen does. He goes bishop to G5. You know, he doesn't like all of the possibilities with the bishop and the queen and even this rook trying to do a little rook lift. So we are trying to mitigate that as much as possible. So bishop takes G5. Queen takes G5. We do see rook up to F3 because, you know, we're trying to see if we can, you know, get some more things rolling over here. So we do see rook up to F3. Pawn takes F5. And then we do have rook to F5. And so we see queen to H6. Something that was actually slightly better was actually just to retreat the queen back to E7, and you don't allow white to get any tempi on your queen. But since the queen did go to H6, you know, we are allowed to play rook to H5. And I mean, on a good day, you know, this queen will go somewhere, but I mean, you know, this bishop and this rook and even this queen coming in, I mean, you know, it's showing that you have kind of a little bit going on for white. Like I said, it's not winning. So it's not like, you know, black is just about to get swept off the board. But, I mean, they definitely have the initiative and they got some things rolling. So the queen does come over to G6. We see knight up to F5 because why not threaten a fork? You know, let's say if we can get this family fork rolling. Man, can I draw arrows, bro? Or what's going on? Forking. Forking pieces. Okay, so we do see a rook A to E8. Bishop takes E4. Pawn takes E4. And then we do have a knight up to D6. And I mean, this could be a somewhat of annoying fork. This knight is here protecting this bishop. So, I mean, we're pretty much just going to trade, you know, knight for the bishop, which is pretty much going to even things out. You know, just one knight each. And we just got, you know, queen and two rooks. So nothing really crazy. But Magnus Carlsen says, I'm not trying to do any of that. I'm trying to play crazy chess. And we are, we are playing an Armageddon game. So this is a must-win situation. Well, it's a must-win for Aryan Tari, but Magnus Carlsen can get a draw. But, I mean, things aren't looking like it's about to get drawn. And the crazy thing is, rook takes E5 was actually the top move in the position. So, I mean, just grabs you a pawn and a piece. So after rook takes back on E5, we do see queen taking D6. And, I mean, black has a pawn. And the very important thing in the position is they do have a pass pawn that you are going to have to, like, basically blockade or babysit to make sure it doesn't push down the board. So that is an interesting feature. So we do see rook over to F5. We see G6. First, we're going to throw a tempo on the queen. So we do see rook to D1. Queen comes over to E6. And then we do have rook F. Man, my back position, bro. We do have rook F to F1. You know, the major thing about the position that we see right now, this pawn really isn't going anywhere. And both of these rooks are on half open or open files. So white definitely has, you know, kind of the game in hand right now. They're not completely winning, but they definitely have a much stronger position than black does. We do see queen down to E5. We see queen up to E3. But I mean, it's nothing too crazy yet, but white definitely, like I said, definitely has the upper hand. They're up about 1 right now. So their position is definitely much far superior. So we do see A5. You know, we're thinking of maybe trying to give this bishop some life to come on the A6. Maybe start tickling some rooks. So the king steps back over to G1. And you guys remember what I said before about that king sidestepping over to H1. You see that the king has just come back to G1. So basically, Tari has used 2 moves to do nothing. So you have to really be careful about doing that when you're playing your own games. Moving a piece somewhere just to be moving it back later on in the game. And it doesn't do anything for your position at all. Now, like I said, Tari is definitely in a much better position. But just think of the different things that he could have done if he hadn't moved king over and then just king back. Like, anyway, so we do see rook over to E8. We see rook up to F2. We got F5. And this can be a little bit scary because, like I said, you do have this pass pawn. So if you can start to get these pawns rolling with each other, I mean, you're going to be putting white in a really, really defensive position. So you really kind of need to do something. So we see G3. So it just kind of stops everything from rolling. We do see king down to G7, knight up to B5. We see rook to E7. And then we do see B3. Now, backing up, we had this knight to B5 move. Now, knight to B5 might look slightly strange because you're thinking, man, I mean, this pawn is just right here, right? Well, you got to be very, very careful because there is a very deep combination that can come up from that. And this is something that Magnus Carlsen must have seen, and that's why he went rook to e7. If we get pawn hungry, if we get pawn grubby, like Yasser Sirawan likes to say, then we would see rook to d7 with check. And you might be thinking, okay, I'm just going to go rook to e7. Well, the main thing about the situation is once we take this rook here, this queen is going to be deflected away from the defense of this one square. That is the major issue. Rook takes e7 with check, queen takes e7, and now we have queen to d4 with check. And this is going to be picking up this knight, and you are just completely winning the game. So you did have to calculate a few moves, but this is the end result for that pawn. So since Magnus Carlsen did not fall for that, he went rook to e7. Now we need to protect that pawn, so we do go b3. The knight comes up to e6. We see knight to d6. We see bishop to a6, which is kind of crazy. But, I mean, the rook is no longer here on f1, so we're not really attacking anything. And Tari just says, bro, shut that up. I mean, no play for you, Mr. Bishop. Like, we're not even, the bishop is like, okay, thinking, why am I here? I just need to move back to b7 pretty much, right? So we do see knight to c5. And you see the bar. We have reached the point in the game that if you do want to pause the video and see what Tari finds in this position to basically seal the entire game, go ahead and do so. Okay, so I actually think, this isn't the most obvious move to play because I think a lot of people are, people are going to get it, but I don't think it's just like the move that just completely jumps out to you off top because it might seem like it's not going anywhere. But the move is actually knight to f5 with check. And this is a move that basically just completely ends the game. You do not want to take this knight. But there really isn't much better. It says plus 25. So, you're like super dead no matter what you do. But we do see Magnus Carlsen. He does accept the pawn. So he takes on f5. And then we see queen coming to g5. And we don't have a whole lot of options here, man. Magnus Carlsen hides in the corner with king to h8. But we do see rook taking f5. And it is in this position that Magnus Carlsen resigns the game. And, I think you guys can see, exactly why the game is resigned. The major problem that black has is that this queen is tied to the defense of this rook. And there really isn't anywhere that you can move that is going to still hold this rook and protect this checkmate that's coming over here on f8. So if we give you two, okay, there's literally only two moves that you can make. Both of them are mating. They're just mating slower. The first move is knight to d7 because you have to protect this square. But as you guys know, you could just take the rook. You're not even taking the queen right here. You're taking the rook. Because, literally black is in a zugzwang. Like, there's nothing for them to be able to do. Rook to f8 is still checkmate. This queen is attacked. This rook is doubly attacked. Like, this is just... And then the horse is gone. The knight is gone. So it's like, the knight is just sad. Look, the knight's not even there anymore. Like, that's how sad the knight is. It's just gone. It's just dead. Okay, backing up. After the rook took f5, you do have the only other move that protects checkmate is rook to e8. And you're just going to take the queen. And you can't even move the rook off the back rank because then rook to d8 is going to be made. So, you have to go knight to e6, but then queen coming to f6 is check. And, what do you do here? Like, you move the knight, and then now you have a dumb knight checkmating. And, you can't, look it, listen. You can't do that because it's pinned. Checkmate. The only other thing is to move the king over. And then you do see this here. And this is just, like, taking all of, like, black's pieces off the board. So, like I said, this is the best that it's going to look in this position is here. So, Magnus Carlsen did resign the game. And that's just beautiful, man. Tari, in his interview after the game, he said that he saw knight takes f5 all the way back here. So, he was saying that I go knight to b5, get that little tactic going in there. I'm honestly not even sure that he even calculated you know, the whole variation of knight takes a4. But anyway, once he got to this point, he was like, man, I know I see knight takes f5. You know, the knight came back, and then we see knight to d6, and this whole thing just basically, you know, just came true. So it's interesting, even beating Magnus Carlsen for the first time, you know, how much respect that he has for him and stuff like that, because, you know, he was talking about he was double checking, second guessing, like if he really had the game sewed up, because, you know, this is Magnus. So it's like, man, is it, you know, am I right? Because you definitely don't want to be wrong in these situations. But that was that game. Like I said, when I actually saw the game, you know, I was like, man, this is beautiful. You know, we had Wesley So's queen sacrifice yesterday on Tari, and then he bounces back today and comes and does a knight sacrifice on Magnus Carlsen. So he's paying it forward, and Magnus Carlsen is just a victim of that. So that is that. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Maraming salamat aking mga kaibigan. Tusen tak, anybody coming from Norway, and I will see you guys next time.